kutoka milimani, Bungani hadi pwani. ELOG inasimama kwa sauti huru,
kwa uadilifu na haki, sisi tuko imara. Kenya mpya kwa matumaini ya dhati.
Kutoka kaskazini, kusini, mashariki na magharibi, tunajivunia Kenya, nchi ya matumaini. Kwa uadilifu na amani, sisi tunaimba kwa kusema ELOG for credible, peaceful, free and fair election.
Hi everyone, I'm your host Karen for the Darubini ya Uchaguzi podcast, and in this podcast we'll be having discussions about electoral processes in East and Horn of Africa. And today we'll be having a community town hall session in the office where we'll be taking different inputs from everyone. And you're welcome, I guess. So the first question that I'd like to ask, which I'll be directing to Kinyua, who will also introduce himself as he's answering the question, is on the current state of the electoral process in Kenya. So, Karibu Kinyua on the podcast, and tell us who you are as you answer the question. Thank you.
Asante. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Eustace Kinyua. I am the Electoral Processes Officer at ELOG. And that is a very good question. I think, as the host has said, we as ELOG, we need to interrogate the status of how prepared Kenya is. We are just a few years to elections. In fact, we are halfway through the electoral cycle, and we soon will be preparing ourselves for the 2027 elections. So that question about how prepared we are is very important at this juncture. And I think where I can start is to say that we are not doing well as a country. Number one is that so far we don't have an IEBC commission in place. At least today, the court has given verdict that the president can go ahead and be able to appoint the selection panel to be able to give us an IEBC. That is a good indication that we might be having an IEBC in place very soon. Secondly is that without IEBC means that we have also lagged behind when it comes to electoral reforms. We have so many electoral reforms that have not yet been dealt with. So that is another big gap. And yet we know we need reforms to be done with by the end of this year, 2025. In 2026, we're not going to be having reforms being done. So the ball is on IEBC court now that after they are done with the selection panel has selected the IEBC commission, we need to kick the ball rolling so that we can get our reforms done and then be prepared for the elections. The big question though will be, are we going to be able to dispense all the reforms that have been put in, we have at least recommended to be done before that time? Another thing that I believe is also a big gap for us as a country is that the Kenyans are not happy with the leadership we have today. So the Gen Z movement that was also causing a lot of mayhem, currently they are still not very happy with how the country is being run. So for me, I will also give a very sad view of how prepared we are, because the Kenyans have not felt the impact of the leadership that we elected. So my biggest question is that will the Kenyans be able to enjoy the leadership that they put in place before the 2027 election? And the indication so far is that the regime is not being supported so much. So I don't think we are going to get a lot as we had anticipated when we said the Kenyans had given a verdict or had decided. So for me, I want to stop there and allow others to come in. But for me, I see a very dark cloud in Kenya today as we prepare for the 2027. Thank you.
Just before I pass the mic on, to follow up on the conversation that you're having, I'd like to ask, this is a bit controversial. Why do you think we didn't have like measures before to ensure that we had like IEBC running in place, that the selection panel wouldn't take as long as the other previous one had?
Yeah, I think Kenya being Kenya, we had put in, the law required us to have a commission in place that is staggered, whereby we had the 3 commissioners that were retiring in 2024 January, who are supposed to be replaced by the 4 that joined at a later date, making sure that there is no vacuum. But the resignation of the 4, after what happened in Bomas, after the 2021, created the vacuum we are seeing today. Otherwise, the 3 commissioners, after they resigned, we would not have had this vacuum we are currently having if the 4 were still in office, because they would have taken up the mandate of running the commission as we await the filling up of the 3 positions. But their resignation, then the retirement of the 3 is what put us in the crisis we are in today. Currently, as we speak, the commission, the chair of the commission, after he suspended the registration when we went to the elections, we did not even have a chance for the same to be done, for him to open for registration of new voters to continue after the elections. Because immediately after the election, in January, he retired. So those are the gaps we are still currently looking at. The fact that we don't have even the boundaries have not been done is the same thing, because now the commission is not in the office. That is a constitutional crisis we are currently tinkering with. But if to say that we had not foreseen it, we are going to be lying to ourselves. We had seen it, but the fact that they resigned, we cannot say that we had not anticipated that. We had prepared ourselves for that eventuality. It's only that the 4 resigned after the 2022 elections. That's why we have the gap today. Yes.
So next, I'll be going to the second part of this discussion. And as an organization, ELOG that is, we boast about having a credible, peaceful, free and fair election. And because of that, we'd wonder, why is it that if we are saying we have all these good principles in our elections, why do we still have bad leadership or poor governance? And I'd like to ask for an input from one Gen Z in the office to give us a different lens on what they feel like.
Thank you, Karen. My name is Pauline Agesa. Actually, I'm not a Gen Z, but thank you for recruiting me into Gen Zs. The media monitoring team lead at ELOG. And for me, I'd say one of the biggest issue we have as Kenyans is identity-based affiliations, whereby huyu ni mtu wetu, it doesn't matter. I don't know why we are really so into these affiliations, whereby the moment you realize a person is from your community, your religion, a certain sector, you actually forget that this person is not an ideal leader or an ideal politician. So for me, I'd say, I think it is basically our mtu wetu ideology, where if this person is from a different community, and then you're really willing to see their negative side, you're really willing to see their incompetencies. But then when you realize that this person is from a certain group, is from a certain part of the community, even social class, maybe they're from a certain class, they're from a certain region, then you suddenly forget the criteria of a good leader. So regardless of what happens, year by year we'll continue electing or experiencing poor leadership, because we are too much into associating with our person, mtu wetu, and all that. And it leads to poor leadership, because we'll keep on making the same mistake over and over again. I know there are so many other points. Maybe someone else can.
Like to someone else in session. One of the biggest things that we see with identity politics is something that has been going on for years. So this is something that has been in our history. So it's very interesting to actually look into Kenyan history and see that identity politics started with our forefathers. So with the coming of the Gen Z movement, it's been interesting seeing that one of the biggest slogan when people were having maandamano was we are tribeless and we do not identify to a certain community, nor are we affiliated with something. So I'd like to ask another Gen Z in the office, or the first one wasn't a Gen Z, but I'm so glad you took up the mantle of a Gen Z, to give us input on what they still think about the same question. So what I asked basically was, what are your thoughts? Currently, I was just giving inputs on the fact that Kenya has a very big issue with identity politics, where people vote, which is something that was actually seen with the impeachment of Gachagua, where all of a sudden people actually forgot that he had mistakes when he was running in office. There are aspects of his leadership that were not acceptable. It switched to huyu ni mtu wetu, mbona mnamtoa kwa ofisi. You know, it then switched to Kikuyus, and I quote from what I read on Twitter, going in to support him and saying that you are not doing right by our person. So with the coming of Gen Z, now we have the aspect of tribeless, leaderless. Like, we do not need to identify with a certain community to be heard. So if you can add and give, what are your thoughts on that? And what are your thoughts on the aspect of having not having good leadership in Kenya, irrespective of the fact that we are boasting that we do have free, credible, and reliable electoral system?
Hi, Lloyd Otenyo. An intern here at ELOG. First of all, that was a crazy question. On the aspect of Gen Zs being leaderless, I think it is true Gen Zs are leaderless, but we have tukona nini. Sorry, I'm searching for the words. In politics, hakuwezi kuwa na group enye haina leader. And your time when Caswell was I don't know if it's signed or recruited by the ODM party, all of a sudden we looked at him to memgeukia like he's not one of us anymore. But you have to give him a chance to go up and try to do what we were doing with him in the streets. And sorry, what other thing did you mention? Yeah. Yeah. Peaceful, yeah. I think as a nation, we need to give the president time. Many people oppose me on this, but I mean, even if someone else was to be put there, the problems will still be the same. And like the Adani deal, the one for the JKIA. Kenya is in debt. We need to find a way of generating money. And yeah, some of the contracts to it was bad, and obviously kuna watu wanakula hapo kando, but the country is in serious debt and we need to generate money. So vitu kama easy. And right now, I think I saw somewhere that the farm that accused the Adani group was shut down. I don't know if it was on kama ni watu wa Adani walifanya hivyo ama what the information they were giving out was false. I don't know. But again, on venye umesema, okay, what ELOG stands for, free, fair, and credible elections. I think there's an improvement in the electoral, how elections is done, has been done over the past years. And there will always be an aspect you can't expect like ikwe change to be 100%. Kuna kitu kidogo, like yes, right now in the last few elections akuja kuwa na violence, post-election violence. This whole tribe thing is still there. Nakumbuka the time I went home with my dad because he said he wanted to vote huko Kakamega. Aliogopa kupanga laini penye anaenda where we stay. Juu alisema hapo najua hii area imejaa watu wa hii kabila ingine. But I feel like in the last elections, personally, from my point of view as a Gen Z, again, I'm still young, sijui vitu, but in my point of view, I think I've seen there's an improvement, and I can say ELOG is doing its work well. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So, first of all, how long is he into his term?
Yeah.
And why do you think he should be given time? And when he was pitching his, what is it called? Memorandum?
Yeah.
On what he's going to do for the citizen. This is the second year. Is it the second or the third? I think it's
Third.
the third year of his term. And typically when you're doing, so acha niangalie tu kama project. When you're doing a project cycle,
Yeah.
the first and the second year are usually to try out mistakes and errors. Uone kama hii itawaka ama haitawaka.
Mm.
So what allowance from how you're thinking makes you like
Again, Koyokiti, the president being given more time. I don't mean like, I don't know if that's what you mean, but I don't mean like gets another term. Personally, I want him out. No. But every person who wants something, they always try to sell their capability, what they can be able to do, even though it was someone else alingiapo. By now, there's some things which they would not have done. And yes, he's in his third year, I think. He's in his third year. But I think what majorly has influenced his dislike with the people, because at the end of the day, it's the people who put him there. His dislike with the people, that this movements, because it's within our rights to have movements, and then unapata cops are being sent there, people are being killed. I was there for the Gen Z movement. I was there like twice, and we used to have this thing we're saying the bullet missed me by an inch, and some of his decisions have not been really good, have not been well thought through. Like can I mention the reshuffling of the cabinet? Like you fire all of them, then you bring them back just in different places. Like I remember when they were fired, the whole country thought, yeah, we're moving forward. At least say our voices are being heard, Nini. I don't know if it was a week, or I don't know how long it was. We're seeing the same people being brought back, but now into different positions. And it was his trip, again, like I've said, most of his decisions are not well thought through. His trips outside. I don't know if this was true, but Niliskia, he's traveled, in 2 years, he's traveled more than Uhuru or someone did in his whole 2 terms. And there's just some math that is not adding up. Maybe by the time his term is ending, he will have changed some things. He might have helped in some scenarios. But I think people should just wait for his term to end. If they re-elect him back, again, it will be the people who re-elected him back. And yeah.
My question would be, would Gen Z being leaderless, tribeless work for them or against them?
For me, I think it will lack against them.
Explain.
Because in Kenya, you need to identify with something for you to be able to present these things. And I think what Gen Zs were doing was the right thing. And the fact that they didn't have structures of how they wanted it to be presented is the reason as to why they felt they were infiltrated when their leaders were picked by the mainstream parties. Mm-hmm. And that's why they were feeling like their leaders were targeted. If they had structured it in such a way that they wanted it to be about them, if they had structured it to look like the way they had a structure of leaders that are going to lead them, for them to be taken by ODM, it would have taken a negotiation. Mm-hmm. But the fact that these people had no structure to start with, it was easy for ODM to target the cream.
But
the cream of that.
Kenya, my question would be, why joining a structure will mean diluting whatever they believed in?
Not necessarily.
My question would be,
not necessarily.
Or not premise to independent candidates.
I want to dispute the angle that they are going to be diluted. Before the Gen Z movement, nobody would have thought Kenyans can be taken through what Gen Z were able to take us through. Who said they cannot infiltrate the political parties and be able to do what they did with us until going to parliament?
No, but Kenya, you know how political parties are running.
We don't know.
We do.
Before we knew how Kenya is run. Before we knew how Kenya is run. We know we are supposed to be having a leader who is supposed to be the one representing us. And in case of anything, they are the ones who are supposed to talk to for us or represent us. But Gen Z came and deleted all that. By showing us they can be mobilized, they can be moved without having to go through ODM structures, and they were able to go and do what they did. They were able to get up to the parliament level. So the question I'm asking, why would you say for them getting into political parties, they are going to be diluted? Who said they cannot get into the political parties and turn those political parties become the way they do what they were able to do with the country that time? So the idea of running away from the political parties is not the solution. This country is run with structures. We are looking for institutions. We want to build institutions. So we cannot encourage young people to go outside of what we have been building for years. Why did we get the new constitution? The new constitution says we are supposed to run within political parties or independent candidates.
Thank you.
So we need to start applying that. Yeah.
Thank you for mentioning the constitution, because the new constitution brought for us something that has really worked for people who felt that political parties are not meeting their needs. Yes. So people come and vie as independents. These are people who do not believe in party politics, or let me just go it alone. And we've seen them winning, getting elected. So why would it be so different for Gen Zs to field an independent candidate?
Now, independent candidate as who? You see, why who is Gen Z? Is the Gen Z an individual?
Gen Z are young Kenyans.
And is a movement.
And is a movement.
That movement alone is already a structure.
It's us.
That's why they were even attempting to register it. Okay. So even the idea of being leaderless or structureless or whatever they were saying, being in that movement and being able to mobilize themselves. Who was mobilizing these young people?
It's a structure, yes.
It's a structure, isn't it?
But it's very different from the conventional type of. It's very different from the usual type of structures. Ama zile structures zenye tumezoea. Because most of the structures zenye tumezoea, and I say this with no pun intended,
yes,
ni up, bottom. So this one is bottom up, but see a ruto, where we are basically empowering everyone down to go up. You know? So how this structure...
I repeat that one. Bottom up. Where is the up?
So the up is all of us now moving towards that one goal, and that is having good governance. So
yes,
that is the up. And that's why I'm saying, yes, it is a structure. I do agree with you on that, but a different structure. Yenye hatujazoea sile. It's not for instance, kama nikupe example, it's not the conventional office ati vile tukiingia kwa ofisi you have to wear a suit and tie. Here you come as you are, and we capacity build you based on the knowledge that you have. So how the movement looks like is very different from what actually people think.
My question, I want to follow this question again, and I want to ask you. You are in a house, isn't it? Let's say, for instance, you are in your house at home, isn't it? It is possible to change that house while you are still in that house. You don't have to go out of that house to change it. Is it true? Is it possible to do that?
I'm not understanding.
I'm saying you can be able to make changes in your house while still at that house. You don't have to leave the house to do it from outside. Is it true?
Yes.
So you're in Kenya. A Kenya that has structures and functional offices that have been created. The only downside with Gen Z is that they are not in those structures. Yes? So if you get into the structures, what is the ill of you getting into the structures and changing those structures to work for you the way you are so energetic about how you want the change to happen? What is wrong with joining those structures and changing them?
But how can we join those structures if we are not given a chance? A clear example, let me show you. Tulikuwa tuna complain about the reshuffling of the cabinet. Which Lloyd was also talking about. The cabinet was reshuffled. Have you seen that even after the cabinet being reshuffled, we do not even have one Gen Z? And I remember one of the biggest things that we were speaking about in the movement was kila mtu atume applications, and if you're qualified, you get. Do you want to tell me from all those applications that were sent to the government office, PCS, Public Service Commission, no one was qualified for that position? Look at it right now. We do not have young people who can represent us. For instance, this ICT role that was being hired right now. Currently, if you go on X, if we look at the ICT person for Rwanda, it's a very young person. They're even able to represent Rwanda in the World Economic Civ platform, which talks about the inclusion that other countries have. Sisi hata tuki-apply hatupewi. So how can you talk about us wanting to change to even be included, hata si kuchange, to even be included in the existing structures? Kama we can't even have space there to talk, to petition, and even when we do those things which we're being told to follow, which is apparently the bureaucratic process, we are not even included in the final processes. The nini, what is it called? Malipo inaenda kwa watu wazee.
The question I want to ask you, can you prove that there were people who applied for the jobs and they were not taken?
Me, I applied.
For which
speak
minister?
For myself.
You wanted
Ministry
to be which?
of Youth.
To be?
Yes.
To be? The CS.
Sindio.
Okay. Yeah. Good. Now, the question I'm asking, when you were applying for that position, you wanted to be a leader,
Yes.
but Gen Z said they are leaderless.
Oh, interesting.
Who are you to lead? Yeah. That's the confusion. Thank you.
But I think Kinywa, that will be boxing the Gen Zs in a corner, because it's like you're telling them because they say they are leaderless, they should not go for position of leadership because they're looking for change. But it's only that they don't want to coalesce around a leader. And I want to use the example of anaitwa nani Kasmuel. Millennials kwa nyumba. Kasamweli. Kasamweli has joined the youth wing of ODM. And one of the people who joined ODM through the youth wing was Babu Owino.
Yeah.
Babu Owino has shown indications that he'd want to vie for the presidency. I would even go for the top position in ODM. What happened?
Yeah, you tell us.
I don't know what happened because we tracked this. These positions were given to very old people.
Yes.
Anyang' Nyong'o, Gladys Wanga. But here we have a leader, a youthful leader who's very ready to lead a party that says that it's for the youth.
But
so I'm here just trying to ask,
Ian,
how long will it take for Samuel to rise to the level of even becoming a presidential candidate?
Ian, the challenge is not Kasamuel, and it's not Babu Owino. The point I tried to make, and which I was saying was different for this Gen Z movement, is that you showed us another way of making this government bulge. For the first time, we, the people who have been in all these governments that have run there before, we never thought we can force the government of the day to go the route they were able to go because of Gen Z. We were either being mobilized by Baba, we were either being mobilized by somebody else, and what the governments of the day used to do is to go and buy Baba. And before you know it, the movement is dead. But with Gen Z, without the leader, because that is what I expected you to say, without the leader, the government of the day could not be able to bribe anyone because they didn't know who to deal with. That was the angle that I expected from you. But now that's what I was asking. If you've seen what has worked, infiltration without necessarily joining, who said you cannot go to those political parties and not allow yourself to be in the youth wing and sabotage and do everything in those political parties to a point whereby they are giving you the role to play there, to a point whereby they are calling you on the table? Because if you see, it is mayhem that makes this government tinker. You use that to your advantage. But now moving back, the reason as why Gen Z was
Kenyo, I can answer you.
The reason as why Gen Z was destroyed is because you accepted to be structured, and then you were put into the structures of the government, and by that they were able to control. Because someone nowadays doesn't talk, he has to go through the ODM channels. Yeah, na hata nyinyi wenyewe mmeanza kuwa na ukabila na kuwa na class issues. Saizi Kasamuel akiongea mnamchapa. So even if he was to try and represent you, hataweza kuwa represent. Ukweli ama uongo?
Kenywa, I wanted to say, for me, the root cause of whichever side it is, whether it's the Gen Z or the political class, it's just the lack of trust in the country. First, let me put myself in both positions. I'm a Gen Z. I don't trust my leaders are doing the right thing. Now, remember, as we've said, our country is based on structures. Actually, people fought for the country to have a structure, because without a structure, it will just be chaos. But now, here is the disconnection. As much as Gen Z they do not trust the politics or politicians, they also should see it as they're also not trusted by them, because it's both ways. If there's no, on one side they're like, these structures are bad, The other side is like, we need to follow these structures. So as politicians and whatever they do, how are they even going to let them into the same structures if both sides do not trust each other? So at the end of the day, what we really need is, nobody is perfect and nobody will ever be 100% the best leader, but we really need to do a lot on civic voter education and also what are they called? Discussions or conversations, and not the type of conversations like NADCO. We need to have candid conversations whereby Gen Zs have their own, they see this leadership and political environment from a different point, and so does the other generations. So the conversations really need to be candid, whereby for Gen Z, they say we want accountability. But it's not just accusing the government, oh, this and this and this and this. Why don't people come together and sit and say, when we say we want accountability, this is what is happening? You'll realize that we've had, people are very good when they're not in the politics. And then they get into the politics. And people just turn around. I think it's high time we evaluate what happens there, such that you get a very good Kinywa out here talking to us about fair, free, credible. Then Kinywa is elected into a ministry and things just, you're like, this is not the Kinywa I knew. What happened? So I think it's high time we have a conversation, as in what happens in politics. If these structures have been infiltrated, is the problem the structures, or is the problem the people in the structures? And if we remove those people and bring in new people, is it going to change it? Or will they come in and just continue? So I think it's high time we evaluate. Is it the structures? Is it the people? Can we have a candid conversation? And when we say, for me, I believe when Gen Z say, yeah, we are tribeless, and that is that is what they say they are. But what are they not? For example,
I think based on what my friend and colleague has said, Pauline, the issue I think there's a problem that comes with once someone is on this other side campaigning for these positions. There's the aspect of who has financed you, who has brought you on board as a nominee of that particular party. Are you there to answer to the party's interests? And then once you're once you win the seat, or you are now with the direct nominations, if you're now given direct nomination for the seat, and then you're elected as an MP or given the nomination as a nominated senator or a nominated MP, you get into a quagmire of, are you there to serve the interests of the people, or are you there to serve the interests of the financiers who put you there? So in that quagmire, you are torn between meeting the requirements and needs of your constituents vis-a-vis meeting the needs and requirements of the persons or people who took you through that journey to get you to where you are. And as a human being, of course, we know these kinds of situations lead to aspects that require you to choose either to be amoral or moral or immoral. So the question becomes, where do you lie? And when you go home and sleep at night, how well do you sleep at night? Thank you.
Thank you, Hilda. I'm very glad that you're steering this conversation to this part where we really need to question Chapter 6 a lot. Is it working for us, or it is working against us? Issue of integrity of our leaders. Is this something that we just pay lip service to, or we are serious about?
That is affecting both Gen Z and also the old folks. Because even the young people who have been given the opportunity to lead, the Moraras, When they were given the money, they have embezzled, they have done all what they have done, and I've seen them being accused. You remember even the time Ruto called people to State House to organize the X space, there were people who were accused of being paid. True or false? So why
those are allegations,
but
which have never been proven, and you see that is probably one of the things that we also really need to dig deep into. Misinformation and disinformation, but go on.
Yes, but the question is that you see, when you come and fuel such kind of allegations in a country with mistrust, the point is that even the people who are clean, they will be taken into that bandwagon of being corrupt, number one, which is is happening at the higher levels. So even the Gen Z that are attempting to come and bring the solutions, they are getting into that same. So the alternative that we are looking from Gen Z has not brought an alternative leadership that we can aspire to have. That is the first level we need to work with. Number two is the question about money in the politics. If you don't have money, you cannot be able to move politics. That is another conversation we need to start having, so that we demonetize the aspect of politics, so that anybody, even without money, you can be able to be a leader. That is where we need to get ourselves to. Today, the reason why people are amassing wealth, the Babu Owinos, the Kasamuel of the day, is because they want to be somewhere when it comes to election 2027. And they cannot come back to the people if they don't have the money. They will not be able to pay for the tickets if they don't have the money. The conversation Pauline is talking about is what we need to start having, that candid conversation, so that we demystify this thing about becoming a leader and having to come with a lot of money. If that is what Gen Z are pushing for, then that means the leveling ground of everybody being able to get into that space, they will have made Kenya to move to the next level. But if they want us to continue doing what they want, to become a minister so that they can get money to become a politician next year, then they are not helping us. They should go for a change of how we think, how we do things. Then that culture change is what is going to help Kenyans. Because infiltrating is not going to work, because you're going to be accused of being corrupt, isn't it? Why don't you change the entire scope then? So that now the platform becomes neutral for everyone to be felt like. If you come there, it's not because you're moneyed or you have money bags, it's because you're coming to deliver. Then Kenyans also stop thinking of ngonyo.
Kitu
kidogo must also go. The young people we have today, if I come and buy you beer today, sera zangu zitavuma kuliko mwenye atakuja awaambie venye we want to change the country. Huyo mwenye wa change the country, you will not listen to him for 10 minutes. But mimi kwa sababu nimewanunulia pombe, you will listen to me. That culture must go for those changes to happen. Yeah,
and changing culture takes a really long time. Because we are raising a generation that has seen people going into politics and getting rich out of that. And telling this generation that you don't need to get into politics for you to get rich, then how do we change that mindset?
Changing the mindset is about when Kenyans start looking at when this richness and everything, where does it take us? We are now in an economy that is dealing with trillions. Yeah?
Yes.
We have a very heavy budget to cater for the ministers, the MCAs, the MPs, that is making us to get taxed heavily, isn't it?
Yes.
And we have other jurisdictions that don't even tax people that high, and even they are doing better than us. We want to go back to the drawing board. Where did the rent start beating us? Because this thing of money, if we go that route, we are going the economic way. And it will become more expensive every year. Today we are looking at 300,000 for you to become an MP. Tomorrow it will be 1.5 million. The other year it will be 2 million. And it will become more expensive. The young people will not be able to get there. So the question is, how do we level the playing ground? It's by changing the way we look at things. You are supposed to come and serve Kenyans. You're not supposed to come and enrich yourself for serving Kenyans. You work for Kenyans. But the way we define working for Kenyans is Kenyans become slaves of these MPs. You see Kenyans going to line up at the MP's office to get bursaries. That is enslaving the people. The people themselves need to fight themselves to come out of that. And the only way to do that, Ian, is to redefine who is a leader. Is to redefine how do I become a leader. Without doing that, then we are going to continue complaining, and those who have will continue having more, and those who don't have will continue having less. Today, if I see you as my immediate competitor, as a leader, because I have the monies, I can sponsor you to go to US for education. Nikutoe kwa hii equation, isn't it?
Yes.
And the money I'm using is the money that I've gotten from the people.
You can sponsor me to go to AUC.
Yes, and because you think we are looking at this hapa mbele, utasema wacha niende nirudi nikiwa sasa niko stronger. Ukishaenda huko kirudi unakuwa irrelevant.
Hauna ground.
Or it's because ukirudi hivyo, I'm just ukisharudi hivyo, it's like a favor was done to you.
Yes.
So you cannot beat the hand that feeds you.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think probably the other thing we need to talk about is, do we hate corruption because we are not beneficiaries of corruption, or do we genuinely hate corruption? Because truth be told, ukiambiwa utoke hapa saizi na unalipwa 1.5 million just for not opposing, not for talking or just doing anything, I think many people will actually go for it. So then that brings in the issue that it's like corruption is in the system. Like any stuff yenye tukianza kuitoa, we need to start talking about this thing from home. Like it needs to start from a household level and then neighbor, so that that trust that was initially broken can be rewritten.
I think I can just recall the conversation ya Ruto akisema wazazi wameachilia watoto wamekuwa na tabia mbaya sana. At some point I was siding with him, but then kozile za wazazi pia wamechoka na Ruto. Hawezi kuwa pia tabia yao ni mbaya, so yes, Pauline.
Maybe just to be controversial,
Yeah.
I think we need to define, I think in an African setup, we need to define what corruption is. And maybe in Africa, most of these things we are coining corruption is expected. For instance, if, let me say, during our grandparents' age, if you went to somebody's house, they give you something to go home with. Do you call that corruption?
That was not
And
corruption,
they'll
that was
be
a token.
offended if you do not take it. So actually, I think it's high time we actually define what corruption is, that if it happens like this, or if this is happening, some things are not corruption, it's just theft. So we use it as corruption. Something is just theft, lack of integrity, and maybe it's high time we say, what is this corruption we are talking about? And if it's you, if it's somebody else, it's corruption. But if it's me, it's not corruption.
It is your turn.
Yeah, it is my turn to eat. So
Then just to get clarity from what you're saying, then I think it brings into discussion sasa historia. To what point are we embracing culture, and to what point are we going to choose not to embrace culture, and what are the clear lines then?
That's what I was saying when I started. The Gen Z had started very well by defining what they want. But then, within no time, they were subsumed by the powers that be. Now they are eating from their hand. What you needed to do after realizing that you can move mountains, you needed to define a new Kenya. You needed to define a new Kenya where you want to see the Kenya. The people who liberate is not the old, it's the young. Joining the old, you are joining the old to come and continue being corrupt. You are going to continue embezzling money. You are going to continue bribing, because that is what we expected Gen Z to come and say. No to all this. We are redefining a new culture, and this is how we want to see it. So when we tell Ruto, sack everyone, we want to define and tell Ruto, this is the Kenya we want to see. And then we move it from that point and build bit by bit, bit by bit. It will take time. The same way we said Moi had destroyed this country for 24 years, we don't expect Kibaki to come and build in 5 years. We don't expect Ruto to come and... Because they will continue blaming. And not unless somebody else says stop. We need to stop and reflect. This country is going in a hole. Nothing is going to change.
We have institutions that are supposed to stop this.
The institutions that yesterday I heard somebody saying NCIC should be disbanded, those are the institutions that we build using our constitution, isn't it? Because now somebody somewhere says that they're not doing their work, we need to disband them. I'm saying this, the Gen Z needed to redefine the liberation route. It might not be achieved now, but they would start somewhere and start, when we said we want a new constitution, that is the young people of that time and the people who are fighting for it said that is what they want. It never took 1 year. It took more than 10 years for that to happen. So even these Gen Zs need to say, this culture has to stop. We don't want to pay taxes because we know we define for the leaders. Without paying these big numbers of taxes, we can cut on that cost. And then we give them the new reality that they can work with, showing them if you go with what we are proposing, you're going to save this number of trillions. Then that becomes a movement. Everybody says, can we go and try what these young people are telling us? That is how it changes. But if you continue telling us, I'm going to join them, mullahs of the day, they joined the youth movement of the time. They wanted to change as youth wingers.
Now that I've been mentioned, I can now come into the conversation. You see, one of the things that, I think the first thing that I wanted to disabuse is the issue that Kenya is speaking about in terms of a kind of an us versus them thinking. You know, the minute you start classifying citizens as if no generation has the responsibility to be able to liberate the country, then you are losing it. Because the responsibility for changing the country into a better country rests upon the shoulders of every citizen. Whether they are young, whether they are old, whether they are in the system, and where they are not. And the truth of the matter is that when we discuss corruption in this country, we are not discussing every Kenyan. We are not discussing every old person, every old person has been stealing, or every person has been part of the cabal of elites who are, getting into the tenderpreneurs. It's not all of them. Neither is it even the young people. Neither are they all involved in this particular process. I think when somebody was asking about what we are defining and how, I think that was Karen who was asking, how then do you want to define corruption? That is where we need to be able to begin. So if you're dealing with the ills of this country and we're saying one of the issues that we want to deal with is corruption, I think the first position that we all need to take is where do you want the country to be in the first instance? And if you think one of the issues which is affecting the movement of the country from where we are to that desired end or that desired direction is corruption, then we need to all be speaking with one voice. But we must also understand there's something called the polity or the reality of how things are at the moment. It's what you call the status. I've heard somebody saying that if you're offered money, you'll be able to get the money, and it is your time to eat. There's a reality around the fact that we are so deep into the problem that we do not understand that every of our moment is a redeeming moment. It's a moment in which you can actually be able to liberate yourself. So that when you only are thinking about that 1,000 shillings or 2,000 shillings or 10,000 shillings or 500,000 shillings for you to be able to get to take an advantage and go and be able to buy some property somewhere, you're still thinking short term. You're still creating the same problem. We are digging a deeper hole at that particular point. We want to get out of the hole, but we are digging every minute. So we must stop the digging first and say, this is the moment. So for those who can be able to fight like the Gen Z who went to the streets, they go there with a very clear mandate to be able to liberate the country from a thinking, from a culture and all those things. The older people or the people in the offices, they also have the same responsibility, the same opportunity to be able to stop many whistleblowers, people who have been working with the government for very many years. Some of them were just about getting to retirement. And they've been whistleblowing in terms of some corruption which has been going on in the ministries. So Those have an opportunity to be able to whistleblow should whistleblow. Those who have an opportunity to be able to refuse a bribe can be able to do the same. If you want the country to move to the next stage, I think, so the first consensus for me, and which is my submission, is that this is a struggle for everybody in the country. It's not a struggle for young people. It's not a struggle for women. It's not a struggle for men. It's not a struggle for a particular segment of the society, the civil society or such. It's a struggle that Kenyans must comprehend with and deal with, all of them, all at once.
Just in line with what you asked, do you think then there's a need to rebuild trust between the society and the civil society? Because how people are looking at it from the ground, I'm talking from my view from Twitter, most people see NGOs as a means of getting funding. Like, wanataka tu kutafuta funding, wapate donors, wapate pesa. When it comes to real issues, hiyo ni shida yenyu, you know? So how do we bridge this gap that is already existing right now? How do we tell them that we're actually fighting the same cause? Like, we are not here for the money. We are also citizens of Kenya. And this is just something that we so happen to be working in line with. Like, how do we bridge that?
You know, the quick answer to that question is that I think that first, there's something called going back to the default settings. What are the default settings of everybody? What are the default settings, for instance, for ELOG? What are the default settings for the Kenya Human Rights Commission? What are the default settings for FIDA Kenya? So that the default settings first define that FIDA Kenya was founded on some principle and some value and some objective. Is it doing exactly that? Because why was FIDA Kenya founded? If it was founded so that it can be able to defend or raise awareness around the women issues, then kazi yao ni kuhamasisha wanawake, wanawake wanafaa kuona kwamba kama kuna hamasisho which involves which highlights their plight, then FIDA Kenya is actually doing it. So that's the first port of call, so that the women or the people who are looking at FIDA Kenya first say, well, that organization is actually doing what it was supposed to do. If it was a school should teach and educate and give knowledge. If it is doing that, we will start trusting each of the institutions, each of the initiatives, because they have a purpose for why they were founded. If you go to those default settings, what is the government for? A government was supposed to offer services to the people. You know, so if the government was also in that space, and I remember once when I was working for the city council, I had a very big argument with somebody who was working for a corporate institution, and I was telling them, between the two of us, the one who works in the city council and the one who works in the corporate sector, I think I'm the one in the more noble organization, because they were looking at us in a very negative way. Watu wa Kanjo, hii group ya Kanjo ni watu wa kora tu, watu wa bribes na vitu kama hizo. But I was able to defend the fact that I was working for an organization or an institution or an agency whose interest was to serve public, to provide public service. You know, and that's a noble, it's nearly a charitable activity. So the government is actually supposed to offer charitable services to the people. Corporates are exploitative in nature. Safaricom is in the field so that they can be able to get as much money as is possible, exploiting your need to communicate. Yes, they provide a service. Yes, the service also is key and critical. But the fact that they actually try to do this with a bottom line in mind, as opposed to a government which is supposed to basically provide, then the government sits in a better place when you think about it in terms of its service to the people. But all of them, of course, complement each other. So the idea here is, if all institutions, if all initiatives, if all movements went back to default settings and asked themselves, for why do we exist? Sisi tuko kwa nini? Kama sisi we are firefighters, are we really firefighting? Kama hakuna moto, what do we usually do? Do we educate the people on not starting a fire? Would we even want a fire to be started in the first instance? Should it be the people who are mitigating against any fire coming out of anywhere? Otherwise it can become ile ya California. So I think for me, yeah. So for me, I think the question is, what are the default settings? Kila institution iko na default settings. It is unless it's an illegal organization. The minute it is legalized, its permits say, or its papers say, it was to offer 1, 2, 3. So can it remain there? Because the problem has been that I think in law there's something called ultra vires, going beyond your powers. I think very many organizations have gone to do things they are not supposed to do. And that's where, because they are going beyond, if it's the ministry, it is not doing what it's supposed to do. Either it is underperforming or overperforming, getting into other spaces which are not even supposed to be theirs. If people go back to their settings, then we should be able to have a kind of stipulations, very clear, guided performance, because you are supposed to do 1, 2, 3, just do 1, 2, 3. If you want something else, then you ask for permissions and permits to do the other thing. So I think my layman's definition of corruption usually is not conforming to how things are. Because basically, when somebody is stealing, you're not conforming to how things are. When you're changing something from its use to another use, which is a part of corruption, then you're not conforming to what it's supposed to be. So those people who are either in positions of power, who are misusing the power, is non-conformity to the statutes and the prefects of that arrangement. So for me, that is where the problem is. And if that was to be handled, or people start becoming and that's what we call manners, bad manners. Basically, watu wako na tabia mbaya. That's the reason why we cannot follow what is supposed to be, what is prescribed.
This is a question to Mule. It's about the Gen Z. So tulienda streets. We did what we could. Initially zilianza kama peaceful demonstrations, but ikaishia na kufika bunge. It was a first for Kenya. So my question is, what do you think the Gen Z, we as Gen Z, could have done better to make meaningful and lasting change in the country's leadership?
First, I think what was done was done. So we are where we are because we are where we are. The Gen Z responded to the emerging issues in the country. And I think Kenya is the one who was saying that even in my generation, we went to the streets, we fought. The Sabasabas and the Nanenanes and the Kumikumi started with us. Tulikuwa nakimbia, tunapita kwa mabati, tunapelekana na GSU mbio, tunapelekana na hawa watu wanafanya fujo uone everywhere, destroying whatever we thought was a government property where we could get it. So we nearly did the same thing. So we never went to parliament, but where we saw something which looks like it's governmental, it was still something that we were we wanted to vandalize because we felt that the government was not doing the right thing. So, and that's the youth energy that every generation has, and especially the Gen Z now, knowing of course the other generations which have not done what they're supposed to have done, but who are also seated here. But I think in terms of what they could have done and what. First, they responded. I think that responsiveness for me that was good because they situated themselves as a force, as aware, and as conscious and willing to take action. I think that's the most positive thing that the Gen Z did. In terms of the methodology, in terms of the tools, in terms of the way that they were doing it, there are very many. One, we know that they were infiltrated. So I don't think when you think about the question of the violence which emerged afterwards, I think that was some sabotage by political forces, which is one of the things they need to do moving forward. You must anticipate that there are existing political forces which will defend the status quo. We keep talking about this. Every president has supporters. This country today, for instance, is speaking about the current president as if he does not have his own supporters. He does have his own supporters in the same country. and who are very loyal. So that we cannot have even Gen Zs who support him. I mean, he must have daughters and sons who may be in the category of Gen Zs, and you think they are against the father. So the thing is, and relatives and nephews, nieces, and so many other people. But the thing is, there must be people in this country who support the president. Why do we practice democracy? And what are the tools which are employed within a democracy? In a democracy, we say it's going to be government of the people. But we know that the government of the people, by the people, is an aggregation of interests. It is not, we don't all think the same. We don't all make the same decisions. What we do is that we try to aggregate our interests through a number of methods. One of them is through elections, where we say, we're different, we come from different areas, we support different people, we want a different kind of needs in terms of governance, but then we are offered an opportunity to each of us be able to make a choice. So there are tools. But what I wanted to answer you to in terms, those tools can be discussed in a different setting. For now, what I wanted to tell you, to enhance in response to your question, is that you need to appreciate the fact that interest is aggregated. And that if, therefore, you just walk out there thinking that it's an homogeneous, that mko pamoja, nyinyi wote, that's an illusion. Because the truth is, watu wana maoni tofauti na maono tofauti. We look at things very differently. So what we are supposed to say is, what is the issue that we are saying? Is the finance bill the issue? We organized our movement in terms of how to defeat that finance bill, if there's a way of doing it. We put a lot of pressure. That movement, the Gen Z, one of the victories of the Gen Z in June last year was the fact that they created such a force that members of parliament responded to it, even in their local communities. They were afraid of what the effect would be if they were seen either to support this or to support the other. That is how interests are canvassed. You create also a force and a position which is so strong that the people who are in power, the ones who speak for you, actually now start speaking your language. So the influence that the Gen Z had, what I think it is Kenyan who was talking about it, that over time, that it should have been consolidated. And part of the consolidation, which is part of the good habits that the Gen Z needed to employ, is to start working with others. If ELOG, for instance, produces data on how many people are registered, the Gen Z should have found an ally in getting that information. If the Kenyan Human Rights Commission and other people who are on rights-based platforms can be able to document any harassment, rights violations, they find allies in that. We are not reinventing the wheel. People have done stuff. Research has been done over very many things. Align yourself with the platforms which do exist. Gather that information. Use that information in consolidating the movement. I think that is where the gap was, because they assumed they were the know-it-alls, or they were the main power, that they could be able to push everything. It cannot be done. I think what you need to do is to consolidate the power, the information, the knowledge, gather momentum, have more allies around you, and over time, that is supposed to be able to translate into a serious, a bigger movement than even the Gen Z themselves could have imagined.
Okay, so Mule, I'd just compare during the times you guys are struggling for rights that you fought for.
Which ones?
Repeal Section 2, the Kumi, the Sabasabas, and the sort.
And you see,
and during this time,
Ian, before you move on, you hear what you're saying. You've said something. What are Kinamule doing? They were looking for this. You've said something. What are Kinamule were doing, the old ones, and you even stipulated what they were doing. You can be able to. So the way Mule counted the finance bill. If now that is what Mule is talking about, consolidating. Even us, we can count what we were able to do. Sisi ndo tuleta katiba, si ndio? Sisi hiyo repeal of that section, hiyo ndio unasema, si ndio? So this thing cannot be, hatuwezi ileta venye Gen Z walikuwa nafikiria they can just come and bulldoze the government and everything goes. You need to be able to count Milestones, yes.
Yeah, so because my question was, the question that I wanted to ask was that during that time, the only source of information was radio and television.
Yes.
And in this period of the Gen Z, communication is bursting from everywhere. And just helping to get the Gen Zs to really decipher what's right and wrong is also becoming an uphill task. How do we get to deal with this? How do we get to get the Gen Zs on the right path, to get the right information? Because you're saying the movement Wake and Lion that is very hungry for information. What kind of information are they getting? So will this information they're getting is it going to push us more closer to anarchy than what we wanted for a straightforward nation?
I think this is just food for thought, but just based on what we were talking about, I think we then need to create a space where, because it's interesting, I know you guys were also fighting on the streets, but for some weird reason, it's now interesting in my head that you guys were doing the same things that we were doing, and yet you would recommend that we go about in better ways. But pia nyinyi mlikuwa mnafanya the same exact thing. Tulikuwa tunafanya hii time ya maandamano. So I think then there is a call to have a space where we have and I'm saying this so that we avoid controversy. We do not have government-based activists, but we have people who have been in the system and they're not affiliated to anything that might be controversial, to just give their experience and say that, by the way, we have also passed through this. And this is how we can help you from our experience. And this is what you guys have done, and we like this and this and this part, because penye mebakia sasa, it's having honest and authentic conversations. That is what is actually selling even on social media, and this is a bridging gap. So how can we create that space, or how can we capitalize on the existing ones to just basically channel everything that we are talking about, where we are not for lack of a better term, aturudi makosa za mababu wetu. Kama nyinyi mlikuwa mnapigana basi, we are also our generation, the next one, Gen Alpha, is also bound to be running on the streets, maandamano wakisema hatutaki huyu, you know. So how can we change the course of action? Yeah.
So I think I want to start. Okay. Oh yeah. I want to say this, and I want to start with what Ian has asked. The new technology, the disinformation, misinformation, what this too much information can also do. I think there are positives and there are negatives to that effect. I can say the positives was when the Gen Z were able to do the finance bill. They are using the AI. They were able to decipher the finance bill very quickly. They were able to even do the Katiba the same way. So because we know there is going to be infiltration of fake news and all that, the point is to have more who are giving authentic information as opposed to those who are giving negative information or disinformation, so that that can counter the disinformation infiltrating the space. So for us who are in that space of offering information, need to be able to work with the Gen Zs, those who are doing those the AI maybe translations, to make sure that more information, more authentic information is out there as opposed to the negative information, because it is seizing the moment. The same way we are telling young people they needed to seize the moment, is those who are in the custody of this data need to seize the moment and make sure that there is an opportunity. There is need for more info. How do we make sure that we are providing that information so that these young people don't get into a space whereby they are misinformed or disinformed, and then they take the country to the dogs? So ideally, I think it's being proactive and taking advantage of the space that we have realized that they want that information to be brought to them. We know they don't read a lot of books. Then if they don't read books, how do we package this information so that it can get to them in the spaces they are in? And I think that is where we are now currently working to see how do we make this information available, readily available, so that they can be able to deal with it. For what she is saying, I think we cannot say that we are the last one to go to the streets. Even after we do everything and we do our 2 cent, the Gen Alpha will come and do their part. It's only that the question you should ask yourself before you go to the grave, what were you able to do? At least generation yenu iko na kitu ya kusema, they were able to do, si kama hii akina Nick. That's what I can say now. Yeah.
One of the questions which is self answers, or which is self revealing, is the fact that si hatukutumia AI in our time to get to the streets and to get our information. So what has happened in that particular space, in just the space of information collection? If the Gen Zs are using AI and us, we were using either books or we were using speeches or we were using whatever we were using, so how yes, so where is the movement between, so in this particular respect, that this group used this and agitated for change, then this group used a progression of what these guys were doing for change. So why are we ending up at the same place? So these ones, they used this and then they went to the street and they fought. These ones, they used AI and they went to the streets, they fought. Why is that other equation not changing? Unajua vile simultaneous equation inafanyagwa, unapata you changed this X and Y do not end up being the same thing on the other side. I mean, there must be a factor of X and a factor of Y, which has also changed. Why are we having AI and AI powered agitation and what do you call the other one? Opposite of digital, ni? Analog, and an analog powered, ending all in mandamanos which are the same. There's something wrong. I would say, if you look at that equation, there's something which needs to change. This one cannot be going to the same battlegrounds as the other one. It should mean that the new approaches, if this analog made them go to the streets, and that's what they could understand, the digital one should take us to another engagement. It cannot be the same streets. So why I'm saying this is, one of the things which is very evident is that there's no progression in the method of the agitation. And that needed to change. You cannot be doing the same thing your babus were doing. If you guys went to the forest to fight, alafu nasopia tunataka kwenda kwa forest, which forest, and kuna drones na kuna nini kila kitu wanaweza kupata saa hii. So I think for me, I think the challenge that I find with the current generation is that while I totally laud the fact that they were able to stand up and they were able to participate in terms of agitation. In fact, I think for me the biggest victory for them was the political consciousness. That if they had the political consciousness to be able to stand up to the authorities, I think that's a major plus. But it should be that all our generations are politically conscious. So we should not even have a gap. From the time that you were there to the sisi ni X, ile ya Y, ndio tukuje kufika Z. Si kuna Y? Si ndio Y. So hiyo Y, ndio fike Z, ndio kuje sasa A tena, alpha. Those are the ones which they should be able to continue the same story. Because beyond us, which is the other generation, baby boomers, who fought for the world, who went for world wars, who fought for independence in different countries. You can see there's already some progression. Those guys fought to create a country. Sisi, we fought to create institutions. That's why we have a katiba, as Kenya was saying. Can we continue talking about the same thing again in the next generation? So I think the challenge is that defining the cause, number one, has been problematic. The struggle is okay, the struggle is the same, and the struggle must continue. A luta continua. But I think we need to change a number of things. We need to change the tacts, some of them which have changed. At least I appreciate the fact that the AI, the new way, if there's something as inspiring for me, was to see those young people who are dancing, bringing their music to the streets, because that was totally new. We anticipate. I remember when we went with our groups, Kina Olang Sana, we even, if you ask Kacheng, she'll tell you we bought guitars at one point so they can come and sing. Even transnighting on events like New Year, so that we can be able to say it's a revolution kind of a transition. We're not going to stay in our houses. We'll light candles hapa itaneni Kampiko Kibera, Rowalan. Tunakaa hapo, tunajipikia hapo, tunaimba nyimbo za mapambano, alafu mna gitaa. See, Gen Z came with their phones, new music, pop music, whatever kind of music, to ensure that the thing was actually, it was much more organized. So in that front, things changed. The struggle and its approaches and how to deal with the enemy did not change. And I think that is where the problem is. The other thing which to answer as a final thing to answer Ian, and in terms of the differences, I think you wanted to ask about the differences. Where did NGOs come from? Where did the proliferation of political parties come from? So we created the platforms for agitation. We not only went to the streets, but we formed civil society organizations. We formed movements, and then we formed political parties. I always say I was in a social democratic party. We decided deliberately to join political parties. So in a conversation, I think Pauline was listening in, where I was last week, about the discussion about the Gen Zs and the youth change across the world, Bangladesh, everywhere. One of the things which was stated by one of the experts was that the problem with the youth movements, Libya, Tunisia, Egypt, and all these other places, is Mozambique, is that there is no alternative platform they are creating. So they fight, munakuja hapa munavuka, tutaki kitu hapa ikwene na mnatoka. So, but these machines are still functioning. I mean, the work still needs to be done here. You are coming to tell people here, change or perish. Then you come and fight everybody off, kila mtu anarukia kumadilisha huku, then this place remains without any functionality. That is what Kenya called anarchy. So without platforms, without alternatives, because many there are those who went even to education. How many, what we are seeing now as PhD holders, the current crop of PhD holders, there are guys who decided to go even pursue education towards certain direction, to change areas. Remember Wangari Maathai, akipigania mambo ya environment, that was also a struggle, an informed struggle, an intellectual struggle around forestation. So what is defining the young people now? Who are the environmentalists in that group? Who are the global change agents in that group? Who are the guys who are dealing with the issues about water in that space? Who are the ones who are dealing with the political issues, the parties and the way the institution of the party is formed? So the question is, the definition of the struggle is not clear. For us, hata wengine waliingia kwa dini. Most of these reverends you're seeing and bishops here are activists. That's the reason why they talk very, very strongly. Walikuwa activists. So when they get themselves to a pulpit, they still talk politics. They still talk change. So the definition of a change is that through the different spaces, this is what needs to be created now. If you don't create that, that's why Boniface Mwangi continues being relevant. Why? He has a platform. He's created a platform. Kina Khalid na wale wengine wako na platforms. Kina Nerima wako has a platform. Bina Masema wako na platform. They create those platforms. Political parties. Yeah. But if you just say the biggest, I think for me the biggest mistake was leaderless, tribeless, the reality is ukikanyaga hapa chini utapata watu wanaongea Kikuyu. And there'll be cultural anthropologists who will be telling you, we don't want Kikuyu to die as a language. So what are you doing about that? You can't say that's bad. So I'm just saying that situate the struggle in a manner that resonates with the people. And the people is not just one generation, the people is everybody.
She's not convinced. I want to beg, I leave, because nikuna pali na kibera ngai, I want to put my gun before 5 o'clock. Sawa.
Thank you very much. Dennis, you still have something to add on? Okay.
I have the last to add. Actually, I had a question. As we wind up, so, my question is, do you think as a country we'll ever grow to and reach a point where we actually able to elect leaders who are accountable and have the well-being of the citizens at heart. Because you see, each and every kila election year, unapata wakianza campaign, hata Ruto the previous year, he had so many people backing, and then after he's elected, people actually see his true colors, and wanaanza kuona ati heri yule mse mwingine nini, but can we reach a point where we actually elect leaders who are accountable and can actually take this country forward?
That is the struggle. That is the struggle that Muli is talking about. That is what the Gen Z were agitating for on the while they were demonstrating with the mandamanos.
Let me just I've had a very simple answer to that is that yes, we shall reach there. And how do we know? How do I know we'll reach there? The progression of our politics. Exists because of Moi. We couldn't talk like this under Moi. Hapa ma special branch wangekuwa by now. Actually, since wangekuwa by now. Amongst 2 or 3 people amongst us wangekuwa recruitees of the special branch. Tungekuwa ripotiwa, wengi wetu wangefika nyumbani leo. That is where we were. Nyayo Torture House Chambers was real. Walikuwa wanatoa watu nails na plies. When kina baba, when people talk about them in terms of the detention and the kind of sufferings they went through, it was real. Are people going through the same? This lady was arrested yesterday, and she did a great job, because that's exactly what we need to be doing, to speak truth with power. But when she went through, when she says I was abducted, she's imagining the worst case scenario. That is not the worst case scenario. Worst case scenario, she would not even be alive in the first place to even speak. Now people talk about habeas corpus, produce the body. It was not there. You disappeared. There are people who have never seen their people up to today. Nani, a very good example is Kongo Karumba. This guy who went to Uganda. The family has never buried anybody. What people say is that not Museveni, but the guys, the authorities in Uganda conspiring maybe with the government in Kenya must have thrown him in River Nile, where he was eaten by crocodiles. But that was one of the Kampenguria 6. He has never been found. Now the court can say habeas corpus. Kama Kanja utakuja hapa utuelezee watu wamepotelea wapi, we'll take action on you and we can be able to sue. That is why I'm saying, if we could reach where we are today, then basically we are moving in the right direction. We have a constitution. Everybody, why did those get to the roads? Because there was a constitution which said what? Maandamano, it's our right. When people say it's our right, it's because it's been prescribed. Were they there? Were they aware of this constitution? Some of them could even have participated in the agitation for the new constitution. Maybe they never even participated in it. But now they can actually say, oh, by the way, having read it, hey, I have new powers. So I think we're going to get there. It's a struggle. I like what you've said. It's a struggle. And no country, you saw guys on Capitol Hill in US fighting over a lost election. We have seen Brexit and thinkings in Britain, who are colonial masters. We have seen the issues in France, despite it being the mother of the revolutions. The French Revolution was like the mother of modern revolutions, the one which was bringing in modern democratic change. But France is still beset by quite a number of issues on governance. So I don't think we are going to, it's a struggle, but I think the fact that we've been improving, there are chances that we're getting ourselves into a constituency. When, let me just use an example. When Ndindi Nyoro showcases and the Moranga governor, Irungu Kangata, when they are showcasing how they have tiled primary schools in their constituencies, how their primary schools have very decent facilities, that's a serious, phenomenal change in terms of state service to the people. All the primary schools in my youth hazikuwa na nini, hata vioo, hata hazikuwa, ilikuwa ni kishimo tu cha kimechorwa hapo na hakuna, it was earth on the ground. Now governments existed, taxes were still being collected. So there's a movement. what we need to do is that it must, especially the younger, the newer generation, it must remain steadfast on the struggle towards ensuring that we keep getting this progress over time. And I think at some point, your question will be answered.
Thank you very much. And as I do my winding short, I think one interesting thing that I've picked up from our whole community discussion, because it really is a community, is the fact that as a Gen Z, first of all, I'm very proud of this discussion. I think we need to talk more on movement building, but now movement building on the digital space. How does it look like, and what are some of the skills that we will need if we are to agitate for change in the struggle that we are fighting for? So knowing that, I think this is one of the best platforms to start. So thank you very much for everyone who has tuned in for this discussion, and for those who will tune in online later, and you're welcome.
Kutoka milimani, Bungani hadi pwani, ELOG inasimama kwa sauti huru.
Kwa uadilifu na haki, sisi tuko imara. Kenya mpya kwa matumaini ya dhati.
Kutoka kaskazini, kusini, mashariki na magharibi, tunajivunia Kenya, nchi ya matumaini. Kwa uadilifu na amani, sisi tunaimba kwa kusema ELOG for credible, peaceful, free and fair elections.
Tunatoka kwa jamii, vikundi vya kidini na mashinani, sauti za wanyonge na sauti za wenye nguvu.
Hakuna aliyeachwa, sote ni sawa. ELOG ni mwangaza wa mabadiliko ya haki. Kutoka kaskazini, kusini, mashariki na magharibi, tunajivunia Kenya, nchi ya matumaini. Kwa uadilifu na amani, sisi tunaimba kwa kusema ELOG for credible, peaceful, free and fair elections. Kwa vijana na wazee, tuko na ndoto,
Kenya iliyo bora kwa bidii na mwanga.
katika Afrika Mashariki tumesimama thabiti kwa amani na haki, sisi ni wamoja.
Kura si nambari, bali ni sauti kwa mabadiliko ya kweli na utu.
ELOG ni mlinzi wa haki na usawa, tunajenga mustakabali kwa ari na nguvu. Kutoka kaskazini, kusini, mashariki na magharibi, tunajivunia Kenya, nchi ya matumaini. Kwa uadilifu na amani, sisi tunaimba kwa kusema ELOG for credible, peaceful, free and fair elections.
Kwa vijana na wazee, tuko na ndoto,
Kenya iliyo bora kwa bidii na mwanga.
katika Afrika Mashariki tumesimama thabiti kwa amani na haki,
Sisi ni wamoja,
basi nambari,
bali ni sauti
kwa mabadiliko ya kweli na utu.
ELOG ni mlinzi wa haki na usawa, tunajenga mustakabali kwa ari na nguvu. Kutoka kaskazini, kusini, mashariki na magharibi, tunajivunia Kenya, nchi ya matumaini. Kwa uadilifu na amani, sisi tunaimba kwa kusema ELOG for credible, peaceful, free and fair elections.